Hey guys, I think this year and last year are showing Disney that they really need to keep their budgets in check. So many of their films are way too expensive and have lost so much money as a result. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. There's a quote that was going around on Twitter yesterday from Pete Docter, whatever the guy is, the name of the guy that's over Pixar, and he was talking about it's really important for us to still make original stories and original movies and not just do sequels. And he talked about how audiences these days just tend to want the familiar and they want a lot of sequels and adaptations. And so it's harder to market original films. And I think everything in there is true, but you don't do yourself any favors when you make Elemental and you give it a $200 million budget. Like you watch it and it really is like top-notch animation, but it's top-notch animation in a way that's not that interesting. You watch Across the Spider-Verse or Into the Spider-Verse and you go, well, this is really interesting to look at. This is very different. Wow, this is cool. And Pixar's movies look really expensive in the sense of like, wow, they spent a lot of money to do the same thing, but even better. Like it just, they have a certain look to them. And even when they do things that are cool, there's cool stuff in Elemental. It's not sell tickets cool. Like the way the characters are drawn, there's a neat way with the fire as well as the water and just the way that it moves and integrates. Like it's cool, but it sold 0 tickets. But they spent $100 million to make the fire look cool. There's no return on investment. Spend $100 million on Across the Spider-Verse and do cool stuff. And everyone's talking about it as every frame is a work of art. You've never seen animation like this before. They spent half as much and it was worth it. And I think a lot of Illumination films only cost like $75 million. This has been going on. Like Illumination makes animated films for like $75 million. And there's ways in which you can say these don't look nearly as good as Pixar films. But to your average person, they look good enough. Like you don't watch an Illumination film and normal person just watch Illumination and go, ugh, this looks cheap. You just watch it and you go, yeah, it's fun. Because you're invested in the story or whatever. And so Pixar's spending and Disney are spending way too much on movies that just don't justify the cost. And in particular, something like Elemental, there's not like my wife loved it, but there's not just this incredible killer story in there. It's like a tried and true rom-com formula it's an immigrant story. It's about two people meet each other from different sides of the tracks. And he's well off, and her family's struggling to make ends meet, and they fall in love, but their two worlds are colliding. I mean, this movie's been made a million times. That doesn't mean the formula doesn't work. It doesn't mean it's bad, but it's not like just like super groundbreaking and interesting. It's a rom-com. That's what it is. Rom-coms are supposed to cost $50 million, and you cast. Not anymore, but Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson, you pay each of them $15 million because their faces and putting them together is what sells tickets. And then, $15 million to have them, have it look professional, but you're not doing anything expensive. $50 million and they were all profitable. And you're paying for actors. This costs $200 million to do the same thing that live action does for $50 million. It doesn't make any sense. And it's, like, even if they'd market it correctly, like, oh man, it's a rom-com. And so the right people show up and it makes a little bit more money. The audience for rom-coms is like $200 million movie needs to make $500 million, $600 million to be profitable. How many rom-coms have made $600 million ever? Has one ever made that much money? Like you don't spend blockbuster money on a rom-com. Doesn't make it a bad movie, but they spent way too much on it. And in a sense, they're elevating it because it is visually interesting. It's like seeing Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson or whoever Matthew McConaughey was doing his rom-coms with at the time. That's not interesting. This is actually visually interesting. There's a built-in metaphor about the elements that kind of adds a little something to it, but it doesn't add, we're going to make $300 million more dollars interesting to it. Elemental feels like the quintessential example of like where Disney's off. I'm all for original stories. I'm all for them taking chances, but you also have to be reasonable. And when you just like throw $200 million at a rom-com because, oh yeah, but it's elements. So it's like a built-in metaphor, a visual metaphor is cool, right? And you throw $200 million at that and then it loses you hundreds of millions of dollars. All of a sudden, people start being like, maybe you shouldn't do original stories anymore. Let's do Toy Story 5. Or, moving over to Disney, let's do Frozen 3. And they stop doing the thing I want, original stories, not because original stories are bad, but because you threw way too much money at a formulaic rom-com that if you'd done it live action, it would have cost a quarter as much. Disney is spending way too much. Pixar spending way too much on their animation. When you can just look at all the other studios that are not spending that much money, and then Disney's just throwing money at their animation. And it's just not a good return on investment.
Most of these clips are pulled from my weekly Patreon live stream. Join at any level and you can join the chat and ask all the questions you want. That's for as little as $2 per month. For $5 per month, you can get your name on my end card. For $25 per month, you can have a monthly video chat with me. Link is in the description for more details, and keep talking movies and TV too much.